One of the things that has come up recently, and it's been there forever, but we're seeing enforcement of it more so now, is state overlooking state specific disclosures or even rights of rescission that aren't ending up in these contracts. So you have investors that are going and pulling these forms from who knows where. They're using them in different states, and they're not properly consulting with an attorney licensed in that state who would know those laws. And then next thing you know, they're missing things. So, for example, in Colorado, anytime a property's in default and you're going to be taking it subject to, you have to give a 3-day right of rescission and certain disclosures and things like that. What kind of disclosure requirements, if any, exist in Texas with respect to subject to transactions?
Well, let me jump into before I get to the Texas marketplace,
Yeah.
like your Colorado law with the right of rescission. I have heard just in the last 60 days that there's a lot of states that have foreclosure rescission or foreclosure rescue rules and
Mm-hmm.
regulations.
Yeah, and that's where Colorado is found. That rescission is on a foreclosure rescue statute.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
And where, some may say you have the 3-day right of rescission, some may have a 30-day right, some
Mm-hmm.
may outlaw it completely. I don't know. And of course, you hear that. We don't have that necessarily here in Texas. You may not have that in Arizona, but some 20 states I hear have some form of that. So,
Mm-hmm.
of course, I know that y'all do this. I know I try to do the same thing too. If I'm working with an out of state client, it's like I can walk you through the deal and get you 98% of the way there, but you got to talk to that knowledgeable real estate attorney in your area. If you're the investor who's buying the house or you're selling it to a third party who's buying it, someone needs to talk to that knowledgeable real estate attorney, which is hard to find, unfortunately, in this industry, who has some knowledge base about that.
Mm-hmm.
And make certain that if there is some issue regarding foreclosure rescue, or it might be, you're able to ensure that you navigate that appropriately so you don't stub your toe somewhere along the way. So I think you need to do that. And then, of course, here in our wonderful Texas marketplace, as you said, there's always these rules and regulations that come into place that aren't in other states. So you've got an Arizona investor trying to play investor in Texas. You got a North Carolina investor trying to play in Texas, and they don't have the same rules and regulations, and see it constantly. They think they have a good contract and whatnot, and it's like, guys, here in Texas we have what we call the underlying lien disclosure notice, which is a mandatory disclosure for any seller to provide a buyer, whether that buyer is a consumer or non-consumer, 7 days that they can rescind the contract for any reason, and it's mandatory. And we just recently got a new Texas Finance Code requirement that's a promulgated insurance paragraph, which all must be signed again prior to closing. If you don't sign these, there are problems. Here in Texas, again, because one investor out in beautiful El Paso, created all the problems for us. Now, every transaction where there's an existing mortgage in place, and the key is they don't define what the existing mortgage is. Is it a mortgage or is it an IRS lien?
Mm.
So since I don't know that answer, we're doing on anything that's being left in place, judgment lien, IRS lien, et cetera, just as a fail safe that's out there. But if you don't close in a law office or a title company, your transaction is not voidable, it's void. And that's pretty strong language, right?
Yeah.
That's the first one that you want everybody to understand. The second one is if you don't provide these new disclosures, and we've had the underlying lien disclosure notice for quite some time, but now they've put more teeth into it. Monetarily, it says now if you do not do it, the buyer can rescind the transaction and ask for all their money back. There used to be a reasonable rent scenario along the way. If the reasonable rent was $1,000 a month and their payment was $1,000 a month, you got nothing. But now they can come back and go, return your down payment, return your monthly payments. That means principal, interest, taxes and insurance payments. Other damages are associated with that. And it's like, guys, do it right. Find the right people, talk to the right people, don't be stupid. Unfortunately, they're still out there a little bit. And of course, here in Texas, the next one that came into play was if you do more than 3 transactions in a 12-month period like this, you have to be a licensed RMLO, and your company must be registered with the state of Texas, with the Savings and Loan Administration. So they did that just because there were some bad actors acting out there, and they're trying to weed that out. And I guess when you look at all of that combined, it's not a bad thing. It's really a good thing when understanding it, and it doesn't affect a transaction. In the thousands and thousands and thousands of these deals that I've closed, I've never had a buyer back out but for once with that underlying lien disclosure notice. It just doesn't happen. They want to buy a home. They want to be a homeowner, and you're affording them that mechanism. But just because you're doing that, there are unscrupulous attorneys out there. And I would never point that finger at you guys, but there are those guys out there who office around the courthouse who are looking for that investor who didn't do the right thing.
Right.
So they can go file that lawsuit and hunt money somewhere somehow.